Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever and whenever you may be listening to this broadcast. I'm Mark Holliday. Welcome to your encouraging word for today. Listen, before we get started, and I'm going to keep you long, I want you to do something. I want you to like, subscribe. I want you to share this video. I want to start doing something in the next couple of weeks. I want to start talking directly to men. You know what I've noticed about women? Oh my God, you can rally some women together. You start talking about prayer, you talking about travailing and helping and birthing out. You start talking about the gifts of the Spirit, the women begin to come out. And one thing I've always been looking at and examining over the years, why is it there's a lack of men in the church? A lot of places that you go to, you will see the congregation is predominantly almost 80% women, 20% men. And those 20% men, sometimes the wife had drugged them to church. But nevertheless, when I began to examine churches where I see men just stacked from front to back of the church, I take note of the message that's going on in that church. And when I took note of that and still do take notice of it, what's going on? The message has a sense of purpose. That's right. Men need purpose. Men need something to do. And I want to talk to you today about the man cave. And this is going to come out of 1 Samuel, the 22nd chapter. But before we go there, I just want to talk to you about something. I was at the firehouse a couple of weeks ago, and I had a broken chair. And when I told the guys in the firehouse, listen, my chair is broken, I kid you not, in the matter of a minute or two, tools was out. The chair was upside down. I mean, our heads was in it looking and pointing and probing and seeing what was going on. And collectively, all together, the chair was fixed in 15 minutes. What happened there? Purpose was brought to the forefront. It was brought to the middle of the men. And what it did was activate something. And I found this out now, and we're going to be talking about this for a little while. In order to get men together, listen, pastor, listen, minister, organization, if you want men to get involved in where you are, it has to be a sense of purpose. You have to put men to work. If you go anywhere and you see men sitting down, you're going to eventually see them nodding off. You're going to see them not interested. You're going to eventually lose those men because a man needs another man. I like to say it this way. Men in the church, you have to become a man's man in order to gain men. Now let's turn to 1 Samuel, the 22nd chapter. I want to show you something here because this is my goal, what we're getting ready to read in the scripture. I'm going after men because we're losing men in this secular society. They want to feminize men. They don't want men to stand up and be strong. And if you are strong, you are persecuted for who you are. And we're going to fight that. We're going to attack that because you know why? There's a generation coming behind us. They need to see strong, godly men, not men who's misogynist, not men who's men that abuse women. Not men that don't know how to do things and just useless. And I'm explicit with this. My dad used to say, a man without a purpose and a man without a backbone, you're as useless as tits on a bull. And I had to sit down and think about that. I'm like, Dad, my dad had a lot of sayings. What do you mean about that? He said, just look at it, Mark. The bull got tits. And what are they used for? He can't give milk. They're useless. And so in doing that, my wife would say this. I heard my mom say this: a man without a purpose or a man without a backbone is useless. But this is what we're going to do. We're going to encourage, we're going to equip, we're going to empower men to be men, because that's what we need. Now watch this. 1 Samuel, the 22nd chapter, I'm reading out of the King James Version here. And look what it says. David therefore departed thence and escaped to the cave of Adullam. And when his brethren and all of his father's house heard it, they went down to him. And everyone that, watch this now, everyone that was in distress, and everyone that was in debt, and everyone was discontented, gathered themselves unto him, speaking of David, and he became, watch this now, captain over them, and there was with him 400 men. Just imagine if you can get 400 men to gather around a man with the purpose. Now, without a shadow of a doubt, David was kicking butt and doing everything since he was a teenager. You know the story how David killed Goliath, and they was chanting, Saul has killed his 1,000, but David killed his 10,000. And David began to contemplate what shall be done for me, whoever killed this uncircumcised Philistine who's defying the armies of the living God. Even from a youth, David knew who he was. And right now, this is my goal. And I was in this predicament. There's a lot of men who do not know who they are. Yes, you're successful. Yes, you're making good money. Yes, you have a career. Yes, you are married. Yes, you have children. But if you're like me, at one time in your life, there was a struggle down on the inside. You didn't know exactly who you were. In other words, sometimes we need another man to activate purpose in us. Tell me who I am. This is why it's so important to have fathers or mentors in our life, because another man will activate something in other men and begin to show them who they are. Yes, you may have had a wayward life. Your father might not have been in your life. You might got involved in the wrong lifestyle as a young man growing up. Some of you got into drugs. You were incarcerated. Watch this. Some of you all went off to college and gained a successful career, and you still were and is lost. But like these men here, watch this. Let's go back to this scripture. When David gathered himself, first of all, David was someplace to be found. In other words, David was stationary. David created a place for them to come. The cave of Adullam, according to historians, was able to hold hundreds of men, because when David was there, 400 men gathered themselves to him. Now watch this. What type of men came to David? What type of men submitted themselves? The scripture says there was men that was in debt. Now, these men that was in debt, they was probably running from the creditors. They was probably running from the loan shark. They was running from life. You know, debt will make you do some things. Debt kills the self-esteem of a lot of men. You know, I grew up in the generation that it's always feel good to have when you reach in your pocket, you got a couple of Benjamins in there. You got a couple of $100 in there. In other words, when a man is stripped of who he is and his ability to provide, it makes you feel a certain way. All right. Now, I don't want to go too far into that, but there was another category. It says there was men who was in distress. They had turmoil in their life. They had pain in their life. And a lot of men today, they cannot express without being ridiculed. They have pain in their life, and they take it out on their children. They take it out on those who are close to them. They take it out on their wife. They're always pointing the finger at someone else. It's your fault. You're the reason why I'm in this predicament. In other words, they take hold to the victim mentality. Whether you're black, white, Asian, Hispanic, when you are in distress, you have inner turmoil. And there's nothing more dangerous than a man that has turmoil going on the inside, or activated or going on the inside of him, because eventually it's going to come out. Let me get to this next part, because I don't want to hold you long on here. Then there was men who was discontented. In other words, it was men again who did not know who they are or were. They're unsatisfied with life. And when a man becomes unsatisfied in life, they get into a lot of things, multiple relationships. They get into drinking and drugs. They would get into just certain things to try to prove who they are. And when you know who you are, you don't have to bend, break, bow, or prove anything to anyone, because you know who you are and you know whose you are. And why did these men gather around David? See, David was the type of guy that could able to take the gangbanger and the educated man, bring them together and make something of them. And if you read on in 2 Samuel around the 28th chapter, you will realize David taught these men how to fight. One man, he had 3 guys, and they was chief. And I'm going to put it on the screen. One man was able to kill 800 men. Now, people say, wow, that's powerful. Yes. Imagine one man throwing down with 800 men. But realize this, David wasn't a punk himself. Saul killed his 1,000. David killed his 10,000. What that simply meant was David knew how to bang. David knew how to throw those hands. And so David killed Goliath. David was not, somebody you just want to quickly run up on. But David took these men and he began to gather them together, and he gave them self-esteem. He showed them things about themselves. And this is what we need today. We need men who know how to show other men who they are. I'll give you one more individual, two more in about 3 minutes. There was another man named Elisha. Elijah was able to gather other young men around them, and they got together and they began to build buildings. They was building another worship or sanctuary. But I noticed, why were they able to build? They was gathered around a man, and another man will activate something in other men that will show them how to build. Not just something, a physical structure. You build your wife, you build your children, you build those around you. Listen, when you are a man's man, when you walk in the room, you got answers. You know what? Weak men persecute strong men. They would try to find fault with you because they're insecure with who they are. So I'm encouraging you, men, don't feel ashamed of who you are because somebody else is attacking you. They're really just attacking your security. They're attacking your confidence. And what they would do, they would call you arrogant. You're not arrogant. You're confident in your skin and who you are. Last person I want to talk to you about is Jesus. Do you know Jesus' disciples were teenagers? Jesus was able to rally teenagers around him to the point that these men dropped what they were doing. Matthew, Bartholomew, Judas. You know the story. It was Luke. Not Luke was one of his followers. He later on wrote about Jesus. But Simon, Peter, and Andrew, and Philip, all of these men, these young men, gathered themselves around Jesus. And these men turned the world upside down, because in the book of Acts, the religious scholars looked at the disciples, and the scripture says they took note they had been with Jesus. And this is what I want you to do. God is going to link you up with someone, and they're going to bring the best out in you. And this is going to continue into our other message, because we've been talking about mentors and mentees. Men, you're never too old to be mentored. And I always keep myself in that position. I find godly, strong men who's able to pour into me and able to bring out the best of me. I travel far distances. I'll get their books. I'll find them on YouTube. Why? I want to be changed into another man. I'll end it with this. In 1 Samuel, the 10th chapter, it talks about Saul, the first king. The Bible says he came into the company of the prophets. Those prophets were men. And the scripture says that he was changed into another man, because the attitude and the spirit that was on them, it got up on Saul. And all you need to do is get around strong men, and what's on them going to come off on you, and what's on you going to come off on them when you're a strong man. All right. I'm going to stop right there. I'm Mark Holliday. That's your encouraging word for today.